Before I start this video, I just want to say a big thank you to people who watched the Chicken Little video. The last time I talked about it in the Obi-Wan Kenobi review, it was at 55 reviews.
Now we're sitting at 143 views.
And that's a big blessing to me, and I really do appreciate the viewership. Just wanted to say that before I started. And also, don't be shy to watch the other videos. Show them some love. Like right now, just do it. Do it! Just do it!
In 1984, a movie called The Never-Ending Story was released to the public, and had become the staple of 1980s nostalgia for any lucky soul who's ever grew up in that decade. And while it's only a film that I've only seen recently, I can definitely feel that same nostalgia. Even though I'm not the most nostalgic person in the world, I do appreciate it for what it stands for and how it was executed as a film. It's definitely one I recommend anyone watching. That's not something I would say about the sequel, however. Not because it came out in the early 90s, 1991 to be specific, but because it's horrible. I don't even understand how you can manage to make a film this bad, especially when you only have half the book to work with. That's a lot of source material. I mean, this book is thick and thick. It's quite the achievement, if I'm being honest, but it's definitely not an achievement that any sane person would be proud of. So if you haven't guessed about how I feel about this film, it sucks.
Normally when I see a film that's bad, I would normally dub it as a complete lost cause, in the same way I've done with my previous reviews. But for this movie, I got a different experience out of it. Not that I'm taking back my words and saying that it's a good movie, it's still bad, but I can't consider it a complete lost cause. A lost cause is a movie that's completely beyond repair and has no business being in the industry altogether. I feel like this film isn't that. There's a good movie in here somewhere. I know that sounds crazy and weird, considering the poor reception this movie got, but I think if we go through this film and try to see what could have been done better, I could prove that what I'm saying is true. This is a new movie review category that I like to call an intriguing misfire. This is where I review a bad movie while also attempting to slightly fix it in said review, which means I'll be roasting the ever-living crap out of the film, but I'll also try to create a potentially better one in the same video. Basically, what I'm gonna do is say, wait, this isn't right. Well, let's try something else that we can do. I'm gonna do that throughout this video. It's a new kind of thing for the channel, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Maybe this is something I can do again in the future. But let me know by the end. Before we start though, I'd like to give my condolences to Jonathan Brandis, who committed suicide about a decade after this movie came out. He was only 27 years old, exactly my age, and it's scary to think that someone that young could actually take his own life. This review was not to roast on the actor, it's to roast on the character. So I just wanted to say that before I actually start. With that being said, let's get into it. So as the credits roll, we see the name of the director behind the film, George Miller. Not to be confused with this George Miller, who actually makes films that are good. No, this is George T. Miller, behind such classics as the cinematically obscure Zeus and Roxanne. Basically, it's like the equivalent of asking your parents for a PS5, but instead they say, we have PS5 at home, and this is that. So we start with the film showing what looks like a pretty good looking sandwich, until it gets stabbed for some reason. Why? What did the sandwich ever do to you? Then we're introduced to our main character, Bastian, played by Jonathan Brandis, who's stabbed the sandwich and decides to hold it up in the air like it's Excalibur. Then he's all surprised when all the stuff from the sandwich just falls out onto the floor. What do you think was going to happen, dumbass? So right off the bat, we see what's wrong with our main character. He's not very smart or brave, and really too big of a klutz to save his own goddamn life. I mean, he is a reader like he was in the first movie, but he's also supposed to have some form of a vivid imagination. I mean, that's what saved Fantasia in the first place from becoming basically nothing, but the writers somehow translate that into stabbing a BLT while reading a book, because that makes sense. Here's a better way to open this scene. Bastian's supposed to be a kid with a wild imagination, right? Inspired from the Never-Ending Story, right? Wouldn't it make more sense if he aspired to become a writer himself? Like, he figures a book coming to life would inspire him to put his own ideas on paper. Like, say, for example, the scene here starts off with him in his room writing a story for, like a fictional story for his creative writing class that he does for, I guess, middle school. He looks like he's maybe 13, 14. and he has to do it for class in a given amount of time. And he doesn't really have many ideas that he's proud of, and he's running out of time before he has to finish the assignment. And then his dad walks into his room while he's writing. He's like, "Hey, Bastian, how's it going?" Fine, I guess. Is that your story you're working on? Yeah.
Oh, nice. It's okay if I read it?
No. It's not done yet. I'll let you read it when it's done. I'm working really hard on it. I just want to make sure it's good. Bastian, I'm sure whatever you write is good. I'm not sure if I believe that myself. You will someday, Bastian. Just from that scene that I made up alone would show a sense of growth with the character and showing that he wants to try something different with his life. I mean, at least it will be a better opening than whatever the hell they're doing in this scene here. All it shows here is Bastian being dumb, weak, and clumsy, and shows no form of growth at all. And somehow he's going to get worse throughout the film. We somehow transition from that awful scene to Bastian in a swimming pool. What? Apparently Bastian is trying to make the swim team. Why? I mean, there's nothing wrong with practicing a little athleticism in school, but what does him swimming in a pool have to do with him reading the Neverending Story? Because when you really think about it, none of those two things really come together in an actual theme. This is why I think Bastian should be a writer in this case. Like, say, for example, he has to complete a writing assignment for his creative writing class, but he doesn't feel confident in the story that he wrote, especially knowing that he has to present it to the class. And when he gets to the front of the class, he's hesitant to present it because he's not very proud of what he's written and just, runs out of the school or something. And that's where he goes to the bookstore. And that would be where he finds the Neverending Story for inspiration. But the writers aren't smart enough to come up with that plot, apparently. Instead, we have to settle for this bullshit piece of writing. Bastian tries out for the swim team, but first he has to jump off a high board in order to make the team? What?
Let's see who's got what it takes. We're gonna start with the high board. Done? Erica? Bastian? You're next?
Mr. Coachman, quick question. What the hell does this have to do with the sport? I'm pretty sure jumping into a goddamn pool isn't proof enough that you're a good swimmer. How did you even get hired to coach? Are you even qualified to coach this sport? Are you even qualified to be a coach at all? Sebastian makes his way to the high board, but can't seem to bring himself to take the leap and chickens out. He then comes home to his father, who's disappointed in him that he didn't make the jump from the high board. Because apparently, it's principle to jump off from a high board into a swimming pool to prove that you can swim well. What fucking world is this? Also, that pizza looks pretty damn good.
Yeah. Well, the dressing is common courtesy, Bastian. I mean, something you ought to learn, by the way. Look at that old rag you're wearing.
Alright, so that's an asshole thing to say to your kid. What the hell is wrong with you? Are you trying to compete with Worst Father Ever? I mean, competing with this piece of shit? Do you actually might win or contend at the very least? Not to say that's anything to be proud of, but Jesus Christ. Also, why do these people keep wasting food and drinks? Bastian earlier spills a bunch of crap on the kitchen floor. The dad pours 2 glasses of orange juice and doesn't even drink any of them. He just leaves it there. And then there's that goddamn pizza. Bastian just leaves the kitchen. He doesn't even eat the pizza. I don't care how pissed off you are at your dad. You eat that fucking pizza. We then cut to Bastian mourning over the death of his mother. How sad. And then it cuts to him at a bookstore. What the fuck? What are these transitions? They're horrible. They're so rough and uneven. They're about as smooth as if you're driving off the side of Mount Everest off-road and you're gonna fall off the fucking mountain. And that's only one of many horrible transitions in this movie. Anyway, Bastian approaches the bookstore owner, Coriander, who was in the last movie, hoping to find a book to help him with his fear of heights.
I'll look in my section on courage.
Coriander being creepy as ever for absolutely no reason. Bastian is then called over by the childlike Empress herself to revisit the Neverending Story once more. The unfortunate thing is that he opens the book and notices all the words are disappearing as he reads through. But then he gets stopped by Coriander.
That book asks too much of you.
But it's the Neverending Story. I've already read it.
But if you ever read a book twice, books change each time you read them.
What? That is the stupidest line I've ever heard in my life. What does he mean? What does that even mean? Yes, and if you read through the biographical history of Abraham Lincoln, you'll learn that he ended slavery by creating the Emancipation Proclamation. But if you read it a second time, you'll also notice that he hunted vampires in his spare time as a hobby. Fucking hell. I think this is what he was trying to say. If you've ever read a book more than once, you'll notice a lot of things that you've never seen in your first read. You happen to find things that you never realized were there in the first place. It's almost as if you're discovering the book for the first time in your life. I know it's a much longer version, but at least it makes more sense than whatever the hell it is they said here. Books change each time you read them. What kind of bullshit is that?
No, look what I found for you.
Let me borrow it, please.
No, Bastion.
Run away, little boy. Run. Sebastian steals the book somehow without getting arrested, and makes it back to his house ready to read what's inside. He then discovers that the Orin on top of the book can actually be taken off the cover. It even allows him to enter the book, bringing him to Fantasia. Meanwhile, our villain of the movie gets word of Bastion's arrival and calls in Armenian Nimbly, who does the most exaggerated pimp walk known to man. And then he sees Zaida, our main villain, putting on her face, I guess. Okay, I get that's a good effect and all, but what's the point of it? It never shows up again, she never does it again. It adds nothing to the story or to the plot, so why is it in the movie? Also, her dress looks ridiculous. It looks like it can actually kill someone. She's quite literally dressed to kill.
The memory machine. Explain it to him, Tri-Face.
Oh, yes, explain it.
Again, a good effect, but again, incredibly pointless. I don't think a four-sided die of 4 different faces is really going to be that useful in this case. I mean, I got that if he built a machine or something, but I don't think you needed 4 faces for that. Also, she called him Tri-Face, even though he has 4 faces. So that would make him Quad-Face, not Tri-Face, because Tri means 3. Okay, so apparently the writers can't count. So Dice Head Face Man, or as I like to call him, Dr. Andrew Dice Clay, explains that the machine is remotely connected to Orin. Not only does it allow Bastion to make unlimited wishes, but every wish he makes causes him to lose a memory. Zaida's goal with this machine is to simply take all of Bastion's memories so that his brain is empty. Why?
Won't remember his own world. He will have forgotten his mission. He will have forgotten the childlike empress. That's when I'll bring order to the chaos they call dreams and stories.
Or you can just, kill him. I mean, if you have that much power, what's to stop you from simply just disappearing and reappearing right behind him and just slit his throat? I mean, that could save you a good hour and a half of this movie. So Zaida sends Nimbly to Bastion in hopes to convince him to make a bunch of wishes.
You have Orin. It fulfills all of your wishes. You want something? You wish it? Orin makes it happen. You're very lucky.
Alright, then wish number 1. Never make that creepy ass look in your eyes ever again, please.
Try it out. Start with a lake. Make it purple. Add some sugar. Raise the temperature so everybody can go for a swim.
I don't know. I'm sure there's a reason for the acid. Maybe it keeps everything nice and shiny.
Now, before I go into depth with this scene, I like to refer you to a quote from a YouTuber named Mark from Fanboyflix.
Be careful when you're giving a character too much power. Because if you give a character too much power, you also have to provide a reason as to why they wouldn't wield that power all the time. Otherwise, you run the risk of the character's actions not making any sense.
Thanks, Mark. Now, the reason why I bring up this clip is because Bastion is literally given the invitation to make any wish that he wants come true, without having the knowledge of the invention that causes him to lose his memories. I'm pretty sure Bastion wouldn't hesitate to make any of these wishes. Why? Because he saw Fantasia nearly get wiped out of existence, having almost little to no control of stopping it. And now that he has Orin to make unlimited wishes with, he'd make the wish to create a fucking wall around Fantasia against his enemies. Like a wall bigger than this guy's wall, in order to prevent something like that from happening ever again. The only problem is, Bastion's an idiot in this movie, and performs little to no common sense when it comes to having this power. So Bastion and Nimbly arrive in Silver City, and I already want to leave this place. Whatever the hell's going on here, I don't want to be a part of it.
Everything seems fine in Fantasia.
Yeah, it looks fine if you're open to join a cult. Bastion explains to Nimbly that he needs to find the childlike Empress, but then he gets attacked by a bunch of monsters and chased down into the city. And despite moving so damn slow, they somehow catch up to him. Maybe Bastion is a faster swimmer than he is a faster runner? Hey Bastion, try swimming into the acid, you might actually outswim them.
Acid!
God damn it. Do you guys remember that scene from The Last Airbender, or as I like to call it, Abydos, where they find the prison of Earthbenders? The Earthbenders have all the power in the world to fight back because they're surrounded by the Earth, but yet they're like, I don't wanna, it's too hard. I can't bend the Earth. I can't even pick up a rock. I'm so, like, unmotivated. And the Avatar's not here. I can't do anything because they're idiots. This scene is like that, but 30 million times worse. You goddamn idiot, Bastion. Just do what Nimbly says. What the hell is wrong with you? Sebastian finally finds the childlike Empress on the projector screen. Apparently she's trapped in the ivory tower and can only be freed by Bastion's own imagination. Also, that woman in the corner there is just hilarious. She doesn't really do anything. She just kind of has her hands out and a fan blowing in her face. I guess it's supposed to be majestic, but it just looks silly. Also, what the hell is this room?
The same force that makes the books in your world become empty has made me a prisoner in my castle. What is this force? Only you can name it, Bastion. Name it?
Yes, dipshit. Name it. The same thing you've been doing in the last movie. Also, why wasn't there a point in time where Bastion and the childlike Empress had a connection with each other, like a relationship they could have built on imagination or whatever? The whole point with the last movie was he had to name the childlike Empress, and the name he gave her was his mother's name. So you think they would play into that in terms of him actually connecting with his dead mother and, kind of helping getting over his loss, because he clearly hasn't over time. I don't understand how you don't take that opportunity, but I'm not the one who wrote the script, it's this idiot. So via next horrible transition, we cut back to the real world where we see Bastion's father looking for his son, but instead finds the book. We then dissolve back to Fantasia, where Bastion gathers all the people of Silver City. And Fan Lady is just gonna stand there, do nothing the whole time. Why is she even there?
The Empress is being held prisoner. And before we can fight the force that is holding her, I must give it a name.
Okay then, do it. Name it. What are you waiting for? That, or you can just wish for the force to disappear entirely. I mean, it could save you a good 90 minutes of the movie. Sebastian encourages the people to join him on his quest, but gets the attention of a familiar face.
Atreyu! Atreyu! Bastion! Welcome back!
So Atreyu tells Bastion that the giants from earlier came from a castle with a hand on it, the one we saw earlier. So Bastion suggests that they should go there in order to stop them. Nimbly then suggests that they have to fly there, and tries to convince them to make a wish in order to help them with that.
There are no roads. You'll have to fly. But a little wish would go a long way.
I'll give it a try. I need something... something that... can fly!
Yes, Bastion, that is exactly what we need to do. We need to fly there. We literally discussed that like 2 seconds ago. Where the hell was your head the whole time? In the clouds? In your imagination? I mean, ironically, that's what's going to save this world, or screw it, considering you're the biggest idiot in the world. God. So Bastion decides to wish for a flying dragon, and then it destroys everything. And they decide to chase it down.
Chase? Did somebody say chase?
Where the hell were you this whole time? They were just talking about flying earlier. You were just sitting in the corner, just waiting for the opportunity, like, nope, I'm not coming out. Nope. They didn't say chase yet, so I'm not coming out. So Bastion and Atreyu chase down the dragon, even though Bastion can just easily make a wish to control the dragon or just make it disappear entirely. But much like the writing in this movie, there's no common sense in this little kid's head. Also, I thought he was supposed to be afraid of heights. But he's in the air, no problem. They brought it up once, and they completely forgot about it. Oh my god. They follow the dragon to the evil castle, only to watch it get completely vaporized. So in turn, they decide to turn back. That's where they find the Rockbiter and his... baby? And An ugly ass looking baby. What's funny about this scene is Bastian's reaction to the whole thing. What the fuck? What is that? Is that a fucking rock baby? That's the dumbest shit I've ever seen in my life. Just, oh my God, I can't deal with this anymore. Just take me back to my world. End this goddamn movie. I do really wish it would end there, though. So Rockbiter explains that he and his son are going hungry. None of the rocks around him are really feeding them or nourishing them, possibly due to the force mentioned earlier. Shows that they might be running out of time in order to save Fantasia. Meanwhile, back in the real world, Bastian's dad visits Coriander's bookstore to return the book, but for some reason he doesn't recognize it. Instead of trying to help him, Coriander decides to be creepy about the whole situation.
Maybe you'll find the explanation for your son's disappearance inside.
How have you not called the police on this man yet? Back in Fantasia, Atreyu finally catches up with the group and says he brought an army inside of a bag, and everyone proceeds to laugh at him. It's funny because their world is at stake, and the only way of surviving is through a kid's imagination. Let's laugh it up. You all deserve to die. What's missing from this film, and I feel like this should have been the sole core of depth with this movie, is the relationship between Bastian and Atreyu. In the last movie, it was only subjected to the pages and the words in the story in the book. But now they're actually face to face with each other, actually talking to each other. So I think, wow, this actually is a really big deal, and this could actually go somewhere with their relationship. It's like they can discuss about what goes on in Bastian's world, they can discuss what goes on in Atreyu's world and kind of make comparisons with each other. They can argue a little bit. And while they do that sometimes, they don't do it in a way that actually makes it interesting. And that's what's really missing from the story. I'm really surprised that the writers didn't take advantage of that. So Bastian and Atreyu make their way to the castle, but then Bastian gets zapped by one of the lasers. Thankfully, Atreyu is there to save him.
You saved my life, Atreyu.
Yes. But you would have done the same for me?
Sure.
Dick. So our duo makes it to the front of the castle, only just to get ambushed by the giants. But they manage to fight back with their army.
Lambos, go!
What the fuck am I looking at? So Bastian makes it to the tower and finally makes a wish to help him get up to the top, which allows him to climb up.
I wish for another step! And another one! And another! And another one! I wish for another one! And another!
Alright, I'm going to be talking about how stupid this scene is in a second. But in hindsight, this isn't a bad idea. Having a point in the film where Bastian makes a lot of wishes should be a given. But it should be for other people in Fantasia, not for himself. Like, if someone dies, then he has to find a way to save their life by making a wish. Or if someone is dying and they have to save him from disease, therefore making a wish. He had plenty of opportunities to do that, like the situation with the giants, the dragon, giving the Rockbiter some rocks to chew on that are actually edible for him. But instead, he's just gonna waste a bunch of wishes on a bunch of steps. Even though he could just wish himself to fly up to save him time. Why is this kid so stupid? After Bastian climbs to the top of the tower, he finds out that Atreyu has been kidnapped and chained up in between the set of stairs. And he attempts to save him by wishing for him to be freed from the chain.
Grab it!
Or just try to grab his hand from the chain. Can you just make a goddamn wish for your friend? Do one selfless thing in your life, for God's sake. Sebastian saves Atreyu, but get ambushed by more giants.
We need weapons.
Awesome. So now it's time to get like a rocket launcher or something. Maybe a grenade launcher? A grenade would be more than enough. Maybe a heavy machine gun, that'd be great too. Anything that revolves a weapon can be very useful in this situation.
I wish for a spray can. I wish for a spray can.
You know, I'm starting to wonder how this kid was even trusted to save Fantasia in the first place. It's just sad. It's like it's pretty much redundant to call you the dumbest kid in the world. You might rival the kid from Space Jam. They destroy the giants to find out that they've nothing but empty shells, which makes Bastian believe that the force that's destroying Fantasia is called the Emptiness. And then they finally encounter Zaida and back her into a corner. Therefore, she admits defeat.
That someone so young could be so clever.
Trust me, lady. This kid is anything but clever. Meanwhile, the dad finally finds out that his son is in the book and that he needs to save him. That's actually not a bad idea either. The dad actually reconnecting with his son by reading through the book, seeing how he's trapped in. Although, I feel like this is something they could have done much earlier in the movie, but I don't know, I guess better late than never. Back in Fantasia, they keep Zaida as their prisoner, hoping that she'll lead them to the Ivory Tower. Also, this woman's wardrobe is ridiculous. Like, she got like a spiked head, a spiked dress, and it's all made of green diamond, or emerald, I should say. You do not need to be this extra. You're literally just riding in a car the whole way there anyways. You can literally just wear an I Heart New York t-shirt and sweatpants, and that'll do just fine. You do not need to wear all that. Before they embark on their journey, Zaida invites Bastian into her carriage, and for some reason he happily accepts. Either he's into older women, or she's a complete, one of these. It's unsettling either way. Now the next bit is going to be more terrible editing and transitions. Atreyu follows Zaida's carriage, and then it cuts to the dad going to the bookstore only to find that it's empty, and then it cuts back to Fantasia, but without an inkling of an establishing shot of Bastian inside the carriage. It's like whoever edited this film or written this movie is completely drunk. So anyway, Bastian and Zaida hang out in her carriage. She tries to convince him to turn against his friends, but I think based on her facial expressions, I feel like she invited him for a different reason.
I've been meaning to express my gratitude for all the generosity that you've shown toward me.
Yes, I would like to express my gratitude for invading my castle, destroying my monsters, and holding me prisoner. I couldn't be more grateful. And here's another pointless scene with a good effect. Zaida gives Bastian a belt that makes him invisible, just so he can wish himself not to be invisible, and then give her the belt back. This kid has no resourcefulness in this entire movie. Why does he have Orin? Just give it to someone who gives a shit about Fantasia. Jesus. So they continue on their journey, but then Atreyu finds out that they're going in circles and farther away from their destination. He tries to warn Bastian, but of course, like an idiot, he doesn't believe him.
Can we even be sure she's going to help us free the childlike empress? I do not trust her. I can tell when someone lies to me.
Are you sure about that? So Atreyu then finds out about the machine and that Bastian will lose a memory every time he makes a wish, and tries to warn him. But again, Bastian, being the moron that he is, he thinks that Atreyu is jealous of his powers, so he decides to ignore him. They get into a fight which causes Atreyu to be knocked out. I don't know. I don't have any words at this point. I don't even feel bad anymore. I'm so tired. I'm so tired of this shit. Sebastian finally realizes the memory machine is real, and he tries to apologize to Atreyu, but is already carried off by Falkor. He then uses Artex to ride across the land, but then gets knocked over a cliff. So like I said before, the dad is reading the book and supporting Bastian throughout his journey, which I said before is a good part of the film. In fact, it's even better when he's actually fully supporting him and it actually follows through. And that also creates an intriguing bond between the father and the son and actually helps reinvigorate the relationship between each other and actually make it more healthy and, again, allowing him to be supportive of him. And all we can do is just look in the sideline, which creates a lot of suspense. Which, again, I wish it was done earlier in the movie, so that that suspense would build as the movie goes on.
According to the machine, he still has 2 wishes left. There must be something wrong with it.
It's working perfectly. Whatever you tried didn't work. He didn't make a wish.
Saida and her giants drove through the earth and into the underworld of Fantasia. Here they could travel with the speed of darkness, which was faster than the speed of light. They would find Bastion in no time and force him to make his last wish.
See, this is what I mean when she has that much power. You can literally just kill Bastion in an instant. You nearly did that earlier. What the hell are you doing wasting your time on a wishing machine? Such an idiot. Bastion continues roaming on his own until he reunites with Nimbly. He tells him where to go to get back to Atreyu and Falkor, and finds himself in the Silver City. And then finds the Silver City in ruins. Bastion notices that Atreyu is on his last dying breath.
I have 2 wishes left, Falkor.
Well, if you use those wishes, you will have lost your most precious memories.
My mother and my father. My mother, she would have wanted it this way.
That is actually a really good line. And a good scene. I say this because, in a way, it resembles Bastion finally moving on from his past loved one. And forgetting about her allows him to finally move forward with his life. And he knows that when he makes his second to last wish, allowing Atreyu to live. Making this the only selfless act he ever did in this movie. I only wish that was going on throughout this entire movie instead of being manipulated by complete bullshit manipulation that could easily be seen by anyone, but again, Bastion isn't very smart in this movie, so whatever. And that's about all I can really compliment with this movie, or really anything I can find to salvage the movie, so I'm just gonna wrap it up here. Bastion makes his final wish, which kills Zaida and her giants, saves Fantasia and the childlike Empress, allowing him to reunite with his dad in the real world, and finally putting an end to this movie. Jesus, what a ride.
So with all those things that could have been changed throughout this entire movie, all the things that I mentioned throughout the video, could have actually made this a much better movie. If I had to say anything that can complement this movie that they've actually done correctly, I would say the acting actually isn't bad. Jonathan Brandis actually does a pretty good job with his role. He's probably the best actor in this whole movie, and some of the acting isn't terrible per se. It could be a lot worse. They've done everything they could with the material that's given to them. The effects and the set design is actually really good as well. And that actually shows like the fantasy world, and for the time it came out, it's actually done pretty well. And the music is also really good. It's also very enchanting in terms of, the never-ending story and all that, being a fantasy and all that. It actually shows, that there's effort put into it. The rest of it is just complete shit, though. All I can really say is, I really wish this was as good as the first movie, because it had all the elements sitting right in their lap, and they chose to use none of them. That's why this movie is so frustrating to watch. Which is why I don't recommend it to anyone who ever watches it. Just go watch the first movie, or you can probably just read the book, and you'll probably get better satisfaction out of that. That's all I can really say about this film. And with that in mind, that's the end of the video. If you tuned in for the whole thing, I thank you for doing so, and I'll see you on the next one. But don't expect to wait too long, because I'm only doing this part-time.